Welcome to Charts Today. My name is David Linton, and today's edition for Tuesday, the 9th of April, comes to you from London. We see markets, most stocks have been falling, just a sea of red there in Updata, and we see here the dollar index actually just coming back a little bit, so turning bearish yesterday on that short-term chart, still medium and long-term bullish, of course. So we're just seeing the dollar falling a little bit, and that means that the Eurodollar actually jumped yesterday to turn short-term bullish. Against the yen, we're seeing that weaker dollar as well, falling through the cloud now, but not really a dramatic fall against the yen, which is where we normally see the dollar strength or weakness show up first. So it is just looking short-term bearish, but not potentially with big downside. And interestingly, the targets that we're seeing, there's no downside targets as well. So expect this sell-off in the dollar to be short-lived. Sterling actually is falling against the dollar, so even though the dollar's weak, sterling is weaker still. And against the euro, sterling also is bearish on the short-term chart. Against the Swiss franc, we're sitting at 131 and in bearish territory there as well. Bitcoin is still holding the $5,000 level, down about 1.4%, but the fact that it's holding this gain last week for so long now does really suggest that we are into potential for recovery. We've got these upside targets of 14, 25%, so that's quite interesting. Taking a look at the S&P 500 index, it was up very slightly last night. The Nasdaq, not much change there on the short-term chart, still bullish on all three time frames. The Dow was actually down 1/3%. We'll look at the constituents in a minute, but still bullish on all three time frames. And the broader-based Russell 2000 index continues to edge higher, but not really performing for the last several weeks. So we're seeing most of the action and recovery has been in blue chips. The S&P future is down slightly at 0.13% lower. The Nasdaq E-mini down 0.15%, so that's lower as well. Taking a look at the UK market, we're down very slightly this morning, so just edging lower there on the FTSE, but still bullish on all three time frames. The mid 250 has been flat really the last several days, and so we are still bearish long term, just struggling to participate in that rally for the blue chips. Germany had more bad economic news out yesterday, and that is just taking the shine off the rise in the DAX of late. We're still bearish on that long term chart, of course. Looking at the CAC Current, we're down very slightly this morning, but not as bad as Germany, and we are bullish on all three time frames, so we're bucking the trend there that we're seeing with Germany. Japan was down very slightly. Hang Seng was up 0.2%, and China down slightly, but actually looking still pretty bullish, holding on to those gains. In India, fairly flat. So the markets generally fairly mixed and undecided. The Aussie market is still bullish in all three time frames. It was up very, very slightly. Brent crude continues its rise, sitting at $71 now. So we really have broken these targets. 72.32 is the next target, then 74.22. That's a further 1.6 and 4% upside, and we are still in the strong period for crude oil at this time of year. From the seasonality, we expect to keep rising into the summer. Looking at WTI, that's also pushing higher, sitting now at $64.50, so closing the gap there with Brent. Nat gas sitting at $2.72. It is in short-term bullish territory, this US nat gas, but for the moment, it's still a big struggle. Looking at gold, we broke above the $1,300 mark yesterday on that weaker dollar. Gold tends to rise on a weak dollar, so it's the commodity relationship. The dollar falls, commodities rise, and we see here that gold is looking short-term bullish. We've got some quite serious resistance to break through here, and this $1,300 level is pretty critical. Getting above 1350 is the real game. If we can break that convincingly, then gold is breaking out to the upside. Silver also just short-term bullish. US 10-year yields just hovering around the 2.5% mark. This data coming from Thomson Reuters Icon or Metastock Zenith if you're a private user. Looking at the individual stocks, for this I'm just using Yahoo Finance, and here we see the the indices for Yahoo. You can use this in all versions of Updata, and you can just grab the screens from the libraries. So if you go to the libraries, you can get these layouts, so you can follow me. Taking a look at the Dow, first of all, the best performer last night was Apple, up 1.5%. So that chart is continuing to look strong in recovery. Still has work to do to make new all-time highs, of course. On the downside, we saw Boeing continuing to fall further, down a further 4%. So real risk here of Boeing just breaking this support level and breaking lower into bearish territory. Incredibly, we are still outperforming the Dow this year on Boeing, so that's really quite something. We see here just holding above 100%. We at one point were as high as 20% higher. So taking a look at the other performers in the market, we had quite a lot of the tech stocks. Cisco was up 0.5%, so that was looking good. Intel were up 0.14%. IBM up very slightly, and Microsoft just edging that a little bit higher, making new all-time highs on the long-term chart. So Microsoft is still looking pretty good, outperforming the market by 5% this year. Looking at the Nasdaq, the best performer was Symantec, up 5% yesterday. Not enough really to change the long-term picture, but we're breaking that resistance level there on the medium-term chart, and we've got quite good upside targets, 50% upside target on both charts. So there is scope for Symantec to rise. Dollar Tree was the worst performer, down 3.5%. Taking a look at the Aussie market, the best performer was Crown Resorts, up nearly 20%, and that's a massive jump for them. It's quite changing the picture really, but not yet breaking the resistance level, but just a massive jump there on the chart. Looking at the downside, we had Pilbara Minerals. They were down 4.7%, entering that long-term territory of bearish, so not so great. China was mixed, and then in India we had the Nifty 50. The best performer here was Yes Bank. We're seeing that recovery with Yes Bank continuing, looking quite strong as we just start to enter the long-term resistance. But Yes Bank is quite a good example of a recovery or a turnaround. We're seeing off the lows there. We're at 150, we're now at 268. So there's been a lot of volatility. They fell all the way from 400 to 150 and then recovered to 268. So quite a good recovery there. Here we see the live prices coming in from Yahoo Finance. Wipro up 2.8%. Not enough really to change the bearish picture here. Massively underperforming the market so far this year. On the downside, Indiabulls Housing. There's volatility here, not quite the recovery the same way as Yes Bank, but we have had some recovery. But overall, we're still down on the year versus the Dow. Taking a quick look at Europe, we start by looking at the UK market. Ocado continues to be the strong performer, up 2% this morning, so more moves there. NMC up 1.4%, but a bearish picture, very different chart from Ocado. Severn Trent is the weak performer, down 2% this morning, and in bearish mode on that long-term chart. Interestingly, here we see on the relative, we're just treading water, very much a triangular pattern waiting for the break. We've got downside targets here, so quite worrying there. You see the live pricing coming in here as well. TUI falling further this morning, so that stock having now underperformed more than 40% this year, underperforming the Dow Jones, so quite big falls just continuing from 1750 all the way to 729. That's where we've got to. On the mid caps, looking at the FTSE 250, Cirrus Minerals, the best performer, they're up 2.3% this morning. That's really looking like a turnaround through the daily cloud, but shortage of upside targets and still massively underperforming on the relative. On the downside, we've got Hayes Group down 2.9%, looking pretty bearish. Saga falling further after last week's big falls on their results. So interestingly, they're just continuing to fall there. And last of all, taking a look at the Euro stocks. Here we have Volkswagen as the best performer this morning in the Euro Stoxx 50, up 1%. And if we look at Eni in Italy, they're up 0.6%. On the downside, we've got SAP in Germany down, Airbus also lower as well, even though they're Share price looks pretty strong, having broken to new all-time highs recently. That's it for today. Until tomorrow, happy charting. See you then.